Hi guys, it's Ray here from City Fan TV, and I hope you're all doing very, very well indeed. Guys, if you're new to the channel, it would be fantastic if you could subscribe. Hit that bell icon so you're notified as soon as new videos come out, and give us a thumbs up if you like what you see, and make some comments in the comment section below, because as I always say, I love reading your comments and interacting with fans on the channel. Okay, this video is about FFP, and what a con it is. It is. FFP is an absolute con, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of people. A lot of fans at the moment, very, very angry. A lot of Everton fans angry with what's happening with FFP. I think Nottingham Forest fans worried about what's happening with FFP. Chelsea fans worried what might happen with FFP. Now, FFP is basically financial fair play, and it's a misnomer in my opinion. But that's coming from UEFA. Okay. In the Premier League, we have, I think it's called the Profit and Sustainability Rules, something like that, which are different, a little bit different to the UEFA rules. I think they're a bit more generous in terms of what losses you can make. Now, the idea, we've got to go back best part of 15 years for this, about how and why and when financial fair play was first mooted. Now, you had some big clubs, the biggest clubs around, who were struggling to compete. Okay, especially the Italian clubs, they were struggling to compete because everybody else had more money. The Premier League had the most money, a ton of money. The top two in Spain had a lot of money. La Liga had good TV deals, but the Premier League was surging forward with its TV deals. And clubs around Europe were struggling, they were struggling to compete. Now, everybody, well, not everybody, but most big clubs were making losses. They were struggling to make a profit out of football because, wages were spiraling, transfer fees were spiraling. Chelsea had come along and they were blowing everybody out of the water. I remember when the Michael Essien deal happened, I think they paid about 35 million for him. It honestly blew my mind because it felt like they were paying double or treble sometimes what players, what you thought they were worth. But Chelsea were paying big money to get players that they wanted. And as I said, it blew everybody else out of the water. And the player wanted to go because they're on decent wages. The club wanted to sell because, hey, if you think Michael Essien's worth about 15 or 20 million and someone offers you 30, 35 million, yeah, you're going to say to yourself, the club is going to say, we want that. If Michael Essien probably is worth, 75 grand a week and Chelsea going to offer him 125 or 150 grand a week, he's going to probably think that's the place to go. So all these things are happening and clubs were struggling to compete. Now, I believe in the guise of helping smaller, struggling clubs, and that's what the guise was. Financial fair play is to help everybody. It makes a fair playing field and all that. And we can't have clubs going out of business. They came up with this financial fair play, which just looks at your profit and loss account, doesn't look at your debt, which is crazy not to consider debt when you're looking at the viability of a club, because debt is important. If you cannot service your debt, or the person who owns your debt calls the loan in, that can sink you. I think Bury, if I remember correctly, Bury went out of business because someone called the loan in. Okay, and they couldn't pay that 2.5 million on whatever it was, and £1 million. They couldn't pay it. So they ended up Bury going out of business. There's other things going on as well, with people say allegedly terrible owners. And you can go and check stuff we've done on, and others have done on small clubs like that. But the idea to protect these small clubs, in my opinion, was just made up. It wasn't to protect small clubs. It wasn't to protect clubs and stop them going out of business, because we've seen, especially in the Northwest, Bury out of business, Oldham struggling like mad, Macclesfield, I think they had points docked because of financial issues. Loads of clubs around the Northwest struggled money-wise. Rochdale is struggling. Everybody's struggling. And it doesn't, financial fair play actually hamstrings you. It stops you spending what you want. You are limited, basically, without going into too much. Let's just say, for argument's sake, you're limited to spend only what you earn. Actually, you can make losses, but let's say that. Well, what other line of business, what other business can you buy something and buy an investment or a business, and you're not allowed to spend whatever you want? I heard a story yesterday, okay? This is a bit of an aside. The fellow who set up Vanarama, okay? I think their turnover was about 750 grand a year. It wasn't massive, okay? I'm just trying to remember the numbers here. Now, he'd got the opportunity to sponsor the National League, okay? Now, that's that's not the Premier League or the Championship. It's the National Leagues. It goes down about 5 levels, I think. He had that, and he said it was going to cost him £2.25 million to sponsor. I think it was up for a season or for 3 seasons or whatever. I think he'd gone to his advisor, and his advisor said, "Look, you haven't got the money. You're taking a huge risk in doing that, but by sponsoring the national leagues, it was, the league that Wrexham were in, for instance, it was called the Vanarama National League. And on the BBC, BBC basically advertised it, Vanarama National League. Everywhere it's advertised, when they talk about the National League, it's the Vanarama National League. That's on the BBC, on commercial channels, and all over the place. Now, what that did, it shot his company forward, okay? Absolutely changed the landscape for his company, his business. And actually, I think he sold that, if I remember correctly, for £100 million quite recently. Okay, so you can see the investment that he made. It was a big risk, but the investment that he made paid off. Why should he be prevented from taking that risk, making that investment if he had the money himself? Why should you be limited to what you're earning? Because if you're limited to spending what you're earning, that basically keeps the status quo. It sets it, in position, and it stays there. So all these big clubs who wanted this financial fair play, this restriction, they couldn't have wage restrictions because that's been outlawed. It's against EU competition law or for, whatever it is. It's against the EU law and other things. They couldn't have that. They couldn't have wage caps and stuff like that. Like I think they have in America, or the franchises, as they have it in America, have got a certain amount of money that they can spend on wages, and they have to fit in with there. But they couldn't go down that route, so they've got this artificial thing, financial fair play. So you cannot spend the money you have. So they talk about Newcastle. Newcastle got a ton of money. They've got this public investment fund inside it, who multi-trillionaires. But they can't spend the money because they're restricted by financial fair play and the profit and sustainability rules. Okay, so all these clubs are restricted. Everton at the moment, they don't spend a lot of money. I think they've got new owners. They want to invest. They want to put money into the club, but they're restricted. They can't. Saudis, they can't put what they want into the club because they're restricted by Newcastle's turnover. Now, this is the thing. The historic club. I'm going to use these terms. Forgive me because I'm using them a bit loosely, a bit of an artistic license. But the historic big clubs, your Inter Milans, your AC Milans, your Liverpools and Manchester United and Everton back in the day, and Spurs and Arsenal and the big clubs in Spain and Germany, your Bayern Munichs and Dortmunds, whatever, their turnover is huge because they've gone through this, especially in the last few years. Look at when the Premier League came along, Aston Villa were one of the biggest clubs in terms of they had a big fan base in the UK, but they had basically they won a similar number of trophies to Manchester United. Look at them now, chalk and cheese. Villa's still a big club, but United are huge because with deregulation and keeping all your home receipts rather than sharing them with your away team and other bits and pieces that went on, and the advent of the Premier League. Some clubs mushroomed. They got massive. Other clubs just stayed the same. Villa stayed the same. Man United, Liverpool, Spurs, Arsenal got massive. With all that, they were making a lot more money. Okay? And I'll give you two examples. Newcastle, let's say, for argument's sake, Newcastle's turnover is £200 million. Manchester City's is over £700 million. Okay? Now, Manchester City's owners may be as rich as the Saudi owners, or the Saudi owners may be 10 times richer than the Man City owners. But each club cannot spend the same amount of money. City's numbers are based upon their income, £700 million. Okay? Newcastle's are based upon their income, £200 million. So they cannot compete in the transfer market equally. They cannot compete in paying massive transfer fees. They cannot compete paying massive Wages. They cannot compete with the number of staff they can have at the club. Okay? Tell me, how is that fair? It isn't. You're restricting clubs or owners' potential for investment. And the only way you can, the main way, or it's not the only way, but it's generally the generally accepted way to get ahead, is by basically pumping money into your club. How did Chelsea get so good so quick? Pumped a ton of money in the club when there was no FFP. City, when City came along, FFP was around the corner. City pumped a lot of money in, and then we've had to stagger it back. We've had to cut back, and we've had to, basically, we can't spend beyond our means. We've got to work within the turnover we've got. Newcastle and other clubs now don't have the opportunity. They don't have the opportunity to catch up. And that's what City were doing. City had to play catch up, and we had to do it very, very quickly before the FFP door was slammed shut. Newcastle, Forest, anybody with money now, if Leicester owners, when they come back to the Premier League, if they want to invest a lot of money, they can't. They've got to base it on what their income has been. So if Newcastle's income is 200, City's is 700, wow. City are in a massively advantageous position. I'm not criticizing City for being in that position. What I'm criticizing is the Premier League and UEFA and the governing bodies restricting the opportunity for clubs and club owners to spend what they want. And by doing that, they're trying to maintain the status quo. Okay, where's the money in football right now? Where's the big money? If you want to make big money in football, where is it? Yes, you can sell players for £100 million. That costs you nothing. There's a lot of money to be made there. That's true. But the big money, getting to the Champions League. The Champions League to City was worth well over £100 million last year. Whatever it was, 125 million. Getting to the top of the Premier League and winning it, that's worth a lot of money. And the new Club World Championship, they talk about 50 million quid just to take part. The winner's going to walk away with just a little over £100 million. Okay. Now, if you're not in the Champions League, you don't get the Champions League money. So you're missing out on a potential 120 million quid. If you're not in the Club World Championship, you're missing out on another potential 100 million quid. Okay. You can't get that money. You can't get to that. So by having this same few clubs who are at the top, who are in the Champions League, you're basically you're kicking down. You're stopping people from getting up there and getting the same sorts of money. So City being in the Champions League, okay, and the Club World Cup and stuff this season, Club World Cup this season's only worth about 4 or 5 million quid. But can you imagine in 2 years in the 2025 Club World Cup, and if you're in the Champions League and that, you could earn somewhere in the region 225, 250 million pounds from those competitions, which are very restrictive. Other clubs, to get in the Champions League, you have to either do really well, have a fantastic season, and usually, if something like Leicester, it's once in a blue moon. It's something out of nowhere. You can try and grow organically, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult to grow organically because bigger clubs will come along and say, we want your player. Ivan Toney at Brentford. Look at that example. Chelsea apparently looking. Arsenal looking. They're looking to offer Brentford 80 to 100 million pounds to buy Ivan Toney. They'll pay Ivan Toney 300 grand a week. Ivan Toney will want to make that move. Okay? And Brentford, their star player, he's gone. I'll give you a really good example. Look at Southampton. Look at the players they sold to Liverpool. Okay? You're not bothered about the Eureka Lamberts, but Adam Lallana did... I'm trying to forgot the guy's name. You've got Virgil van Dijk, big player. You've got Sadio Mane. Those two made a big difference. Okay. Ings. Did Danny Ings go to Liverpool from Southampton? I can't honestly remember all these things. Or was it the other way? But Southampton sold 5 or 6 players to Liverpool and to other clubs. Theo Walcott had gone many years earlier to Arsenal. They sold their best players. Yes, they got a lot of money for them, but eventually they came a cropper because you can't keep getting these deals that you got lucky with. At the moment, the club that's getting good deals is Brighton, getting good deals for sometimes not so good players, or good players, but not as good as, who pays £105 million for Caicedo or whatever. So these it's very hard to compete. And so it's very hard to keep your players if you're losing them to clubs who are offering you 80 to 100 million pounds for your striker and offering to pay them 300 grand a week when they're on maybe 125 grand, 150 grand with you. It's very hard. And clubs have to then they have to push offering players 200 grand a week to try and keep them. Okay, you know, Brentford might come do that. And if Tony says, I mean, that's tough. It's really tough for Brentford to compete because they haven't got the finances to compete. So you're going to lose players. How can you get to that top next level if you can't get your players? Look at, I'll use Brighton again. They lost Caicedo, they lost Cucurella. All right, you might say these guys are a bit crap, but they lost McAllister. There's three that's just spring to mind. I think there's another big player that they lost as well. How can you compete if you're going to lose? They're doing all right, but they're not doing as well as last season because they've just lost three big players. They've lost, you know, 3 or 4 big players. Yes, they've got a lot of money, but now when they want to go and buy players, teams are selling them at much more expensive than they would have done 2 or 3 years ago. Or if they didn't have the big money, they know they got the money, they'll milk them dry. So it's, as I said, it's very hard to compete with the big boys if they're taking your best players. Look at Dortmund and Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich always go to Dortmund and get their best players. And usually they do it on a free. You know, I think they got Mats Hummels on a free. They got Lewandowski on a free. They got, was it Goretzka or whoever? Goretzka? I can't remember now. But so you go to the second place team in the league and you're nicking their best players. How are they going to compete? And you're nicking them for a free, on a free. They let the contracts run out and they take them on a free. How can you compete? How can Dortmund compete with Bayern Munich? Now, the only way they compete is by going out and getting more cracking players like Haaland, like Jadon Sancho and others, and Jude Bellingham. But you've got to get it right. And when clubs don't get it right, they struggle. Look at Everton. They didn't get it right with the players they bought. And I'll be honest, I said it many times. Mashiri was talking and listening to the wrong people. If Jim White's got your ear, then maybe you're not too clued up, and maybe you're talking to the wrong people, Mr. Mashiri. And they struggled, okay, and they're struggling now financially, and you know they haven't got the money to go out and buy players. Yeah, they're struggling right now. So there's so many things going on. But the bottom line is FFP was the people, you know, at the big clubs and big clubs fans and administrators and whatever, they say, yeah, it's to protect the little clubs. It isn't. It's to protect the status quo. No, it isn't. Oh, well, it is to protect the status quo. It's not to give a fair playing field because Newcastle with £200 million turnover can't spend as much as City with £700 million. As I said, I'm not having a pop at City. I'm just saying it's not fair on Newcastle and their owners. And this is the thing. Once City had been taken over, other big clubs were worried. You had, at the time, 3 or 4 Champions League spots in the Premier League. You know, Chelsea had come along and crashed the party. So they were always there. You expect United to be there. But look how many clubs were fighting for 4 spots. Liverpool, United, Arsenal, Spurs, Chelsea, Man City, 6 big clubs. Let's be fair about it. 6 big clubs there. If you're getting Brighton knocking on the door, Aston Villa knocking on the door, hang on, that's 8. So clubs can't budget, and if you're out of the if you don't know you're going to be in the Champions League, you can't budget for that money. And if you're out of the Champions League for a couple of seasons, other teams are getting ahead. If Newcastle are in the Champions League for 3 seasons and Man United weren't, all right, Man United still big, they get a lot of money, they can still compete. But if Newcastle had been in the Champions League for, let's say, 3 seasons on the bounce and Spurs weren't, and Newcastle were getting 70 or 80 million pounds more each season than Spurs were, it's going to eventually make a difference. So the old cartel, can we say that? Cartel clubs, they didn't want that competition because they'd already had Chelsea, they already had City stepping up, Wolves had owners with a bit of money, and other clubs are coming along, like Aston Villa. Right now, if Aston Villa want to spend a lot of money, Newcastle want to spend a lot of money, that's more clubs that are competing for 4 Champions League spots. Now, it might be 5 next season if our coefficient, I'm not sure about what happens to our coefficient. But if you can't compete, if there's 4 spots and there's 7 or 8 clubs trying to compete for it, clubs are going to miss out. Okay, and if you think City are, until this season, almost always there, there's 3 spots for 6 or 7 clubs to compete. It's very, very difficult. So they just want a close shot I think the American owners would love to have this franchise system where there's no relegation or promotion, and so their money's guaranteed in perpetuity. We don't agree with that as football fans. We don't agree with this European Super League and stuff like that. But it's all about money. You got to accept it. It's all about money. This new FIFA World Club Championship was it 32 teams instead of 8? All about money. That's it. You know, the Super League's all about money because clubs especially in Spain, they're struggling to compete with clubs in England. Okay, I think if you look at the top 20 turnover football clubs in the world, but I think 11 are in England. 11 in the Premier League. You get a couple in Spain, 1, possibly 2 in Germany. PSG, you know, that's probably 18 out of the 20 top 20 straight away there. It's very, very difficult for other leagues to compete. So they're not, besides being jealous of what's going on in England. But it's going to get harder and harder, as I said, to compete and to win trophies. That's why they want the European Super League, because it gets them out of a financial hole. Crazy, crazy thing. All this financing football. It's disappointing because that's what it's all about now. Fans are getting squeezed. You know, games are all sorts of times. You know, 8 o'clock on a Monday night. We had that. Then they would do some on Friday. We've seen it with the Women's Super League. Games on a Sunday afternoon at 6:45 or whatever. You know, and Friday nights. And so once TV is involved, they do whatever they want. That's why Klopp complains that he's having to play games on a 12:30 on a Saturday on a regular basis, because that's what the TV companies want. So money is, you could say, the roots of all evil, but without it, how can you compete? To summarize, guys, it's been a bit of it's not been a rant, but it's been a bit of a blast. I think FFP was simply set up to keep the current top dogs as the top dogs. It was to stop anybody else getting involved. It was to create that artificial ceiling so your owners couldn't invest and couldn't jump up, because that's going to put owners off as well. If your boyhood club, okay, if your boyhood club was, let's say, Millwall, okay, and you're a multi-millionaire, okay, you've got 100 million in the bank, and you say, I want to get Millwall to the Premier League, and I want to get it competing. I want to get Millwall in the Champions League. You can't spend the money. But you know, if you could spend 30 million, you'd probably get Millwall out of the Championship into the Premier League. If you spend another 50 million, you'll get them moving up, hopefully moving up the table. If you're a billionaire, you could spend 300-400 million, and maybe Millwall will be in the top 4. You know, obviously you've got to manage everything right, but you can't do that. You can't come along and push your team. Whereas in the past, that's exactly what happened. That's why some of these big clubs got to where they were, because that's what happened. Liverpool, I've got to give you this final thing. Liverpool, okay, the fans talk about this and that. They were formed by a fella who was a Tory mayor, I think the Tory mayor of Liverpool, okay? Now, the club that played at Anfield was Everton, okay? He wanted to increase the rent, and Everton said no. They went across Stanley Park, set up, you know, Goodison Park. They constructed that, and they played there. So this fella had no team to play at Anfield. So what he did, he set up his own team. Okay, he set up his own team simply as a money-making exercise. Pumped it with money. I think they were one of the first financial doping clubs. He pumped them full of money, and within a few years, they won the league. Okay, that's how they did it, because he could invest, you know, surreptitiously, I believe, whatever he wanted, and that pushed them forward. And because of that, that's how they were formed. That's how they started to get ahead. But a Millwall owner can't come along and do that now. So Liverpool, one of the original financial dopers, in my opinion. Crazy, crazy situation. Guys, I'm going to leave it here because I've blabbed for long enough. But if you are new to the channel, it would be fantastic if you could subscribe. Hit that bell icon so you're notified as soon as new videos come out. Give us a thumbs up if you like what you've seen, guys. Give us a thumbs up. We'll get plenty of fireworks for you. And make some comments in the comment section below. I love fans from all clubs. Get involved. Have a debate. Let's try and have a good, honest, adult debate. We try and keep things as much as possible adult if we can. But it'd be great if you guys can get involved. Guys, I'm going to finish off by saying take care. Happy New Year, because we are in the new year. Happy New Year to everybody. I will see you around Blues.